Hello. Have you guys got your passports? Have you got your passports? We're going to America. We're going to America because today in book club, we're going to talk to a gentleman by the name of Gary W. Bryant. And Gary is an American author. Get your passports. You might also need a visa. I'm joking. So, Ace of Hearts, what is it about? So, the genre is what we call a detective story. It's a crime fiction and it's a detective crime fiction. So, we have the protagonist. The protagonist is Ace. It's a nickname. He's a retired detective. We have the antagonist. The antagonist is a gentleman called Jimmy Reynolds, who goes by the name Johnny Reese. And then we have the victim, who is a 15 or 16-year-old teenager called Lily. And we have the detective's love interest, Kathy. So have a look at what I've got on board. So those are your leading protagonists. What is a protagonist? And who are protagonists? How do you develop a main character? All those questions are ones I hope to put to Guy just now to tell me how he used physical how he used a description of physical characteristics and how has he developed personality traits and how was he going about building characters in his story, characterization. I always want to talk to Gary about setting. What's his setting? Obviously, it's where the story is located, but also how can setting be used to enhance the narrative? How can it be used as an antagonist? We want to see how Gary has utilised setting. And the genre. A lot of us like detective stories, don't we? I grew up in the days of the Columbo series. So let's hear how Gary has put a modern twist on the detective story. Gary has studied writing. Is it creative writing? Is that how you call it, Gary? Or is it just writing? She's going to tell us how he has used his knowledge to craft a story. Stay with me. So, could you please tell me a bit about yourself?
Well, okay. Of course, my name is Gary Bryant. I go with Gary W. Bryant as a writer because it seems like there are a lot of Gary Bryant writers. I've been writing since I was in third grade. Maybe a little bit before that. I would write often during snow days and things when other people were playing outside. Um, and I did that until I got to high school, and then I did regular writing assignments, but didn't really do a whole lot of writing. And then, well, let me back up a little bit. I did have a cousin. I had a cousin that he had he had an 8 millimeter camera when we were young, through elementary school and into high school. And what we would do is make movies with that camera. I mean, elaborate movies. We did science fiction movies, built the models, and did stop action photography and all these things. And so we put together elaborate stories, and we made movies through high school up to my junior year of high school. And then he went off to college. He was a little bit older than me, and he went off to college, and now he writes screenplays. But anyway, um, so my senior year in high school, I signed up for an advanced biology class and a physics class. and they were both taught at the same time, so I couldn't take both of them. So the counselor put me in a creative writing class. And so I ended up winning the creative writing award. And so I went to college, and again, I put it aside writing again. I was a biology pre med major in college, my first year of college, and it wasn't until I decided to go into pre law that I started taking creative writing courses again. And once I was there, I had a professor. I had several. Do you know who Ken Kesey is? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He was the writer. Ken Kesey was the writer of that. Well, two of my instructors at the University of Kentucky actually were friends with Ken Kesey. They actually went to graduate school with him at Stanford University. And so they called them the Merry Pranksters, and they hung out a lot together. And it was during the 70s. So you can imagine kind of some of the things that kind of went on in the 70s at a graduate school in California. But my professor also helped start a catalog called the Whole Earth Catalog. And it was a catalog for hippies. And at its last printing, it had 2 million subscribers. So he wrote an entire novel that appeared in a column in that catalog. So, and then he published it traditionally eventually. But I started thinking about him, and I had a lot of his classes. His name was Gurney Norman. His name is Gurney Norman, and so he was very influential on me. He was a mentor for me in college, and so I started thinking one day after 35 years of not writing fiction. I worked for newspapers and magazines, and I even was a communications director for a lobbyist group for a while and things like that, but I didn't write fiction. Well, one day I had this idea that, you know what, I could probably create a Facebook group and I could share some short stories and that would be kind of fun. So I built this group and I started sharing short stories and they would prompt me for the topics and I just write a short story about whatever they suggested. And then one day they said, well, we want you to write a novel. I said, okay. I said, what do you want me to write about? And they said, well, we want you to write about, we want it to be a mystery. And some other people said, well, we want it to be a romance. And my daughter had been in high school marching band. I thought, well, I want a band kid in there too. So I wanted those 3 elements incorporated into the book. And so out of those ideas was born Ace Johnson, who is my main character. And Ace is a widower who is a retired detective. He's been retired for 5 years or so, and his wife has been gone from cancer about 2 years, and he has nothing to do. He just
1 second. Can I just say, for those people who don't understand literary terms, this is going to be the plot. So what Gary's talking about now is the plot. Sorry,
yes, I'm sorry. I kind of get ahead of myself, but that's about as interesting. I told you a little bit about my writing life, and that's about as interesting. What I will tell you, I do this before I go into the plot a little bit more. I love working. I work with teenagers as much as I can. I work with I teach a high school Sunday school class. I work with a youth group, and I was a counselor this year at a camp, which was fun. And I'm a sports person. I was a high school football player and American football. I do. Of course, I have a lot of interests. I was actually recently a character in a play, so I have some pretty varied interests. But anyway, a little bit back to Ace Johnson, but Ace Johnson was a guy that like he was bored. Basically, he thought his better years were behind him. He had nothing to do. He just watched TV and he'd go to the park and feed ducks. And one day, he's sitting in the park and he falls asleep, and he's awakened by the rather rude sound of a clarinet, a honk of a clarinet.
Yeah, and that was Lily playing it, wasn't it?
That's Lily. That's exactly that's Lily Ricotta. And he starts to he listens to Lily talk and he listens to her play, but Lily's a little different. I mean, there are a lot of kids at the park. They're playing basketball and things that kids do, teenagers do, But Lily's different. She seems to have something wrong. There seems to be something really bothering her, and so that piques his interest as a detective. And he starts to, he knows that she doesn't want to. He doesn't want to ask her directly, so he just he listens to her play the clarinet, and he invites her to come back and play the clarinet again. And he says he'll listen to her play again. So she comes back, and over time he begins to discover that there's something going on with Lily at home. And so through his investigation of that, there's a character in her life that's this kind of, devious, and he starts to investigate this guy. And through that, he uncovers this much bigger thing. He discovers there are teen girls missing throughout the entire area. And now he's got a purpose. And I feel like, everyone should have a purpose. And so his new purpose gives him more confidence, and he acts on this. He'd met this widow, and he decides to call her. That's Kathy Williams, yes. Okay. And so he starts to talk to Kathy, and things begin to develop. But the three of them, Kathy, Ace and Kathy and Lily, began to investigate these girls and try to find out what's happened to these girls. The police treat them as runaways, but they think there's a little bit more there to it than that. And so it's a book about friendships and romance, and they're along the way. Ace meets a lot of characters that he becomes really good friends with, especially one lady in particular who was a waitress at this diner, and her daughter was the first girl that went missing. Her name is Shirley. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he develops a friendship with her, and it just so happens that her diner has the best pie in the entire county.
Oh, nice guy.
So, yeah. But he develops a really, the three of them get to be really good friends with Shirley, and so it's but he begins to get to know a lot of these families that have the missing girls, and it becomes personal to him. As a detective, he was a detective for nearly 40 years. He was a police officer for nearly 40 years, a detective, a lot of that. It was professional. He had a job to do, and he did his job. He didn't get personally involved. But this is different. He gets to really know the families of these missing girls, and it becomes very important to him that he find these girls, and the three of them. And along the way, he develops a very, very close, because his daughter, his only daughter, lives 500 miles away, and his grandchildren, are there, and so, but he doesn't have a granddaughter, and he starts to think of Lily as like a granddaughter. And
grandsons, isn't he? And they played baseball.
Yeah, they played baseball. That's correct. And so he starts to think of her as kind of like a granddaughter, and she begins to think of him like a grandfather because, her grandfather had passed away, and he seemed to be the only one that really paid a lot of attention to her. Mom's been kind of distant, but Ace begins to kind of patch up that relationship between the two of them as well. So.
Yeah. So that's just a synopsis of the plot. Well, thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome.
It is a detective story, and because of the genre, you've already identified the classic 5 elements that we would look out for. Mm-hmm. You have a leading protagonist who is Ace the detective. Mm-hmm. You have a suspect who's Jimmy Reynolds, who goes by
Jimmy Reynolds, correct.
Johnny Reyes.
Johnny Reyes, yeah.
Yeah, Reyes. Sorry, it's an American name, is it?
Yeah.
And then you have the victims, Lily and the other 10 girls.
Yes.
And then you have a crime, which is the targeting of young underage girls.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then you have the setting. So I was going to talk to you about the setting. So how have you used where the story actually takes place? How have you used it to enhance the narrative? By the way, you did it very well.
Well, it's kind of vague. I purposely made it vague as to where it actually is, because I want any reader to read this to say, well, this could be my hometown.
Okay.
So I didn't identify a site, although if you kind of pinpoint it, if you use some directional tools and you say, well, it's 500 miles from St. Louis. He mentions Louisville, Kentucky in there at one point. He also makes a trip to Chicago.
He
So
goes to Simpsonville as well.
yeah. So you start to think of it. Yeah, that's kind of a made up town. Well, there actually is really a town, but it's not. It's not.
The real town.
Yeah, there is a real town called Simpsonville, but but it kind of the way he does it, it's kind of you could think it could be anywhere, but it's probably Midwestern. It's probably in Midwestern United States, but it could be really anywhere. But because I wanted a reader to read it and feel like it was their hometown, no matter where they lived.
I like the fact that you made it middle class America as well, people that would not ordinarily be the victims of crime. And
Yes.
so, they had the went to a Baptist church, they were family oriented. And then, so you're not thinking that they will be the victims of crime. So I quite like that. And so this is going to be the first in that series, is it?
Correct. There's a new book coming out. It's due out later this month, and it's a sequel to this one. And when I wrote this book, I hadn't really planned on it being a series. But what happened is there were so many readers that really identified with these characters, and they loved these characters. And they said, "Well, you can't let Ace go away. Ace has got to come back. He's Ace and Kathy have to come back." And so the next book's a little bit different. Lily is based on a real girl. She's based on a girl that we actually, that was in marching band with my daughter. And in this new book, there are actually 5 kids that are based on real characters or real people. And at my book reading, I actually intend to have them read some of the lines from their characters. But they're five kids that I had in my Sunday school class. They're three of them are sophomores in college now, and then the other 2 are still in high school. But it's kind of interesting, taking these people that are real and modeling characters after them. It was kind of a challenge. I first started out with 2 of them, and I thought, well, that'd be kind of fun. They were seniors in my class at the time. And they were getting ready to age out of my class. I thought, kind of a tribute, I'll put them in the book. Well, there were 3 other kids that came along. I thought, man, how am I going to incorporate five of these characters into my book? That's a lot of characters, but I think I found a way to blend them in where you get to know all 5 of them because they have very distinct personalities, and I think it makes the book a little bit more interesting and layers, gives it some more depth and layers. So it was fun.
Okay. Can I just say, to touch on characterization, we want to talk about protagonists quickly before I let go of yourself. You've done so well. Thank you so much. So, protagonists, I see that to bring someone to the forefront of the story, you have given us a lot about their background. And I was just going to say your physical description with adjectives and adjective phrases is really good. I was just going to read from page 62 from Ace of Hearts, available on Amazon if you want to get it. The link's going to be posted on the video, ladies and gents. So, Ace walked through the door, complete with a ring and bell. A crusty, grain, podgy gentleman sat on a tall stool behind the counter. Wait for this. He was wearing an oil-stained, blue striped, buttoned uniform shirt with Steve embroidered on the chest. His string hair fell below a bright red NASCAR cap, like his uniform shirt. The cap needed an oil change. Well, that enables me to have such good visual imagery. And I think how you've done your characterization is quite good. So you've done background, the characters have a backstory, they have physical characteristics, you describe their traits, they have friends, they have relationships. And when you were speaking about Kathy and the name William Williamson, it's very good. So I suppose that building a protagonist, you needed to do these things, didn't you?
Yes. And there are a few different stories going on. There are different layers in this book. There are different things going on. There are subplots that are in the book as you read through it that, and that's because that's the way life is. Life is not one singular line. life has a lot of different subplots. And so there are always multiple things going on in your life. And to just focus on one thing, I think, is not accurate. And my writing was a little bit different in this. I kind of knew what was going to happen in the end, but my writing style is I have characters and I just let them live their life and let them encounter the people that they would normally encounter as they lived. It's not about thinking, oh, I got to put this person here and I got to put that person. No, that they just live. And if you go to the dry cleaner, you're going to encounter someone behind the desk, right? So I just let the characters live their life, and life is interesting enough that you don't have to add a lot to it to make things interesting.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to yourself, and I'm going to post a link under the video for people that want to get a copy of your book.
Well, thank you very much. Okay, that sounds great. All right.
And good luck. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you very much.
Cheers.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.